you not only have these philosophical deductions that are gathered from nature, but now you can pair that, or you can fund that, if you will, with scripture to say, hey, this is how we arrive at a Christian conviction that a response or a defense against potential or actual violence is properly or adequately with a proportional response with something like gun rights.
And this is never something that's celebrated, right? Like people, and so again, in order to be charitable to this position, we never want to say like people are looking to go out and like, willingly trying to kill someone or trying to get into a fight.
Correct.
You know, like, hey, come on my property. Like you should, I totally don't have a shotgun waiting for you, right? Like nobody is assuming that line of thinking.
No, that's right.
In this. And then you combine that with the words of Jesus in Luke 22:36. And this is where.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, this is where things get super heavy, right? And so Jesus says to them, but now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. So he's not even just saying like, if you have a sword, take it with you. He's actively saying, like, go out and get a sword. And the reason we use sword and not gun here is because Jesus didn't live in a time where gunpowder had been invented yet, right?
So how might that be interpreted for today's context?
And so, yeah, buy a gun there, right? Go out and buy a 9mm gun for protection.
A Glock?
Right? Yeah, a Glock 9 or whatever. I don't know gun things
Yeah.
there. But it's like, go out and get one to protect you, yourself, and your family.
Good. So, again, we want to highlight that this isn't, we can't reduce this simply to a cultural conviction, right? Or to some social or demographic heritage thing, right? It's not that. There's actual line of thinking here that connects, on the one hand, a political philosophy of what it means for a government to relate to or to be able to at least uphold and recognize the humanity of its people, and the consistency of that with some biblical principles, which is fascinating, right? Fascinating on the one hand, because that seems pretty compelling on the one hand to say, hey, like, that makes sense. Now, here's where things get really interesting for me, or where I maybe see some of the limitations. The first thing is that from this perspective, it seems that there's a high level of optimism for the government to be able to recognize and protect those, or to be the source from which you get those rights. So what happens then if you live in a place where, and let's say you're a Christian, right? But you don't live in a government that is consistent with those rights. So does that mean that, is that warrant to demand that out of the government? Or is there internal conflict in the reasoning at that point where the government actually doesn't recognize those? Where
I mean, early America thought it was, right? Like it was enough to go to war with the British Empire over there, and they certainly believed that God was on their side there. And like, I don't know, America's pretty cool. I like living here. And so it's like, I mean, you can certainly make the case for that conversation, right? That if these things exist outside of government, then any type of government infringement is a proper recourse and response would be potentially violent overthrow, if that's what it took. I don't know how well my musket will hold up to a tank today, but certainly in theory, right, in principle, the idea could be justified.
Okay, good. Are there what are some other benefits or limitations that you see?
So a couple other benefits or thoughts and idea is it does really seem to line up in the idea. And again, where I am speaking in this position specifically from the idea of self-defense, right?
Correct.
Never advocating
as the last
for first
recourse.
Like everything tried, everything else off the table, no other option. And so this does seem to fit my mental conviction as a dad there in protecting my family.
Yeah, your daughter's what, 1.5?
Yeah, and so this is important to me on a level of being the protector of my home, right?
Okay.
And so I don't quite know how to separate that, right? I don't ever want to do anybody any violence or harm. I don't ever want anything to happen on that. But this just feels natural to me. It feels normal.
Instinctual.
Yes, so much so, like biological, right? And the idea of like, I'll do anything it takes to protect my kid there. And if that means somebody else's life has to end because of what they're doing, you know, to potentially putting my life or my children's life in danger. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a trade I would naturally make. So the fact that it resonates so deeply on some innate level to me
is compelling.
Is important to analyze and think about.
Good. So not only do we have biological or instinctual responses to say, or to validate the desire to protect a loved one. I think you also have historical examples, right, where Christians, not only on an individual level, but maybe also on a grander level, have come in support of even stopping global evil from spreading, right? So, I mean, I don't know. If you think of a few world wars, if you think of even, some wars after that, which admittedly are going to get messier, right? But at least in principle, the idea is if there is an evil that is spreading, you can do nothing.
Right.
Or you can stop an evil from further spreading.
Yeah, I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a perfect example of this, right?
Like, so writer in World War II, Germany.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic thinker, German pastor, right? Fled to America and did some graduate work at college or in New York there, and then felt like he was convicted to go back. And he himself wasn't inherently part of the plot to assassinate Hitler, but he was connected with people who were, right? And then he ends up getting caught, and it ends up being, like this failed and foiled attempt, and he ends up being killed for it. So he definitely had a conversation in that realm of where it's like, I mean, Hitler is obviously a horrifically evil human being. Yeah. So is there a moral thing to do to go and kill him and in his life? Yeah. And a lot of people would have certainly said, yeah, absolutely.
So all that we see here as examples from Christians, also kind of, we talked about biological instinctual response, and some funding here from the Bible. There is a case to be made for Christian wisdom or Christian prudence for the violent response against evil.